Not of the rocking horse piece, actually teaches a student, by the way it's written, to throw an accent on the third beat and have a wrist spring forward motion, and so you don't get all tight. He also has a syncopation built into this, and if I play the two hands for a moment, you'll see the syncopation in the right hand, which is this. And you can see that and I'm not using pedal here, and I will be using pedal when I actually develop it and practice it. But you can see that when I got to those third beats, I sprang forward on the accents with my wrist. Otherwise, you're going to get very tight, and you might not last through the whole piece. It's always good to separate the hands, but I would say in this case that the left hand helps you ground what the right hand is doing, because the left hand is not throwing accents on the third beat, so you have to be very careful with that. The other thing is with the left hand is it seems like in the beginning it doesn't have as much importance as the right. However, when you get to the midpoint of the first part, you notice that there's an interesting counter melody in the left hand, so we need to hear that. Here. So be aware of that and play it slowly and do all your types of slow practicing. He's got a lot of voices here. So it's a multi-dimensional thing, because you can't say, well, I'm just going to play the right hand and bring it out. I'm going to ignore the left. You have to remember that there's that little beautiful counter melody that would be in the tenor range. You could say soprano, alto, tenor. The bass is pretty high. Everything's right about here until the second half, when he intensifies by expanding the sound with octaves and going deeper in the bass. So I think it's very important to know what you want to bring out. That part here where you go. Against that, there's also an interesting flip of the melody, because the melody in the beginning of the right was. Now he's taking that G that was on the top of the melody, and he's flipping the interval of the fifth that starts the piece to a fourth, because when you invert a fifth, you get a fourth, so that now that beginning melody is over here in the alto voice. Of course, it didn't continue, but you have to be aware of that at the same time you're aware of. Now in the next section, the accents again are on the third beat. They're only in the right hand throughout the piece. You don't see third beat accents in the left hand, so you have to really be careful that you don't throw accents in the left hand where they're not written, but you keep the left hand grounded. Okay, I'm doing it very dry right now. You'll hear no pedal. If you practice, you don't want to add the pedal till the end. So you have everything, the touch of what you want to feel, what you want to bring out, good fingering, everything. Pedal comes at the end, in my opinion. Now, in this section, he's starting to go into the deeper part of the bass, and the bass becomes more interesting because it's moving in such a way that you have to pay attention. What you hear here is this. This is a chromatic. So in a way you're hearing. That's important. Now, of course, this is all common tones, these C's, but while this is moving. But suddenly, this is on minute 6, tied over, going to G minor, and then to a diminished chord. You want to pay attention to chromatic movement whenever it occurs. You see a lot of common tone C's, you're not paying attention, but then in that tenor voice, he's starting to put little accidentals. So you have to hear two things. You have to hear and this and E flat, and then the tie resolve. Now over here, what I do is divide the hands, because otherwise you're going to have to do a split. And this edition, the Urtext does say split. trap with a split. And then the bass is very interesting. It's D, G, A. This is D minor. This is one intermodulation of D minor. But now, back to C major. This is primary dominant of C, which the piece is in C. And then this is interesting. This here, bum, bum, bum. You can hear that's an important voice. This is important. Bum, not the common tones, but the moving notes. Now this is interesting. This is parallel 6, or consecutive 6. They're not always parallel. They're consecutive because he's skipping. Well, you could say parallel. They're skipping or they're stepping. That goes back to this at the beginning. So that's an important thing to pay attention to. So when he does this, you got it at this point in the piece, you have to listen. So if you do everything together, you're probably going to listen to the bass a little bit more at this point in the double bar than the upstairs. Although the upstairs, the appeal is the rocking motion with the wrist spring forward. Or that should be hard because you have to do this. Nevertheless, the wrist forward is going to help you all through that. Now we're back to. And while we're doing that, we're listening to. So we gotta listen to both things. And bring out that left hand without the third beat accents, but at the same time, give the rocking horse motion in the right hand, and also. That's why you're thinking in more than one dimension through this. It's a very tricky one because you can think the melody is somewhere and neglect the other hand's counter melody. Or you could do the counter melody and neglect. Yeah. So anyway, this is a composite of many things. Looks kind of straightforward, but it really is a lot of things to think about. But I think the biggest thing for this, to get that rocking horse feeling, is to throw those accents with the wrist spring forward, and that's what I learned from it.